Welcome back to another DIY Squaredrop camper video. In this video, we're going to be finishing up the frame of the trailer, as well as fixing the side marker lights that were not working, installing those as well, and then getting the Spar Urethane on the undercoat of the floor, which will sit on top of these tabs that I'm drilling holes in. It's been quite a journey so far, honestly, and I've taken it into two different shops just to make sure my work on the suspension and the brakes are good. It's actually at the second one right now, so I'm hoping that they'll give me some good information and some good news that I did everything properly. So we'll see. So as I mentioned, I'm drilling the holes here. This are the tabs, which is where the floor will sit on and bolt onto the utility trailer. And this is where I'm creating my spacers. I 3D printed these spacers on my fiance's son's 3D printer. We got him for his birthday. I basically just created rectangles in some software and printed them out so that I didn't have to drill a center hole for the wires to go through the frame. I'd rather have them sit just outside the frame, which is why I'm making this little space down there at the bottom. As well as putting holes through where the screws will go into the frame. Cleaning up everything so that the wires don't get, pinched in here and any sharp edges, because we don't need any cut wires. So right here I'm test fitting it. Everything looks good. So now it's time to drill the holes in the frame. So one of the issues I was having was I connected these and used a T connector to just tap into the brown wire, which are the running lights, and for some reason they weren't working. And I'm not. If you've watched my last video, you know that I'm not really an electrical guy, but I certainly figured this would work. So, partway through this video, you'll see here I'm getting wire that will go from these lights to the brown light, or the brown wire on the frame. It's maybe 1.5 feet, but I use extra wire always just in case something goes wrong. Here I'm testing the lights, making sure they still work, and soldering, using these solder butt connectors here to connect the running light to my extra wire. I screwed up, so I cut it off. It came right out after I crimped and heat shrink it. So we're doing that again. And then it will move to the wire that's already there on the loom to the brown wire. But as I said, unfortunately the T connector did not work. And so I went ahead and redid it by using a butt connector and just cutting that brown wire and using the butt connector to install it. So here's where I, cut apart those wires, put in the T connector, and then I didn't test it right away, of course, and I put electrical tape all over it and all around it, and had to remove all that. So that was fun. And this is where I'm setting the ground for those wires right behind it, drilling a hole, and then scraping a little bit of my primer and stuff out so that it has a better connection point. I'm using a little bit of grease on the hole that I drilled, as well as on the screw, so it's surrounded by grease there to prevent the corrosion. And then here's where I'm undoing that T connector, removing all the electrical tape, getting that T connector removed, and then using the butt connector to better connect those together. Overall, this is probably better anyway, because it's using the soldered butt connectors instead of just some little, thin piece of metal that was supposed to make them work, but it didn't. And here I am installing the tire chains, or excuse me, the trailer tow chains. I had a lot of issues trying to figure out exactly how I was going to do this. I wanted to weld on originally some links, but I did not. And so I looked online and I saw, okay, well, I can just use grade 8 bolts that are insanely strong. And I put the chain one on each side, and used washers, grade 8 washers, and then tightened it literally as much as I possibly could. And then I measured the distance from the ball to the chains on the truck, or where the chains will be mounted on the truck, and went ahead and put the big hooks that will connect to that on specific chain links on there. Later on I will go and remove the excess. And here we are to the test drive. We just went around the block, and I got flagged down by one of my neighbors who's been walking his dog while I'm building stuff, and he's like, "Oh my God, your trailer's, it's moving, you know, this is great." So here we are, we're getting one of the pieces of plywood. It's a 5x10 1/2-inch thick Baltic birch plywood. And this piece of plywood will attach to the frame that we just built, the trailer frame. And so I'm cutting off about an inch, because these were actually a little oversized. It was a little longer than 120 and a little wider than 60. So I'm cutting off enough to where the outside of my walls will sit on the edge of these, not on top, but over it. So I'm cutting off about a 1/2 inch extra, because I have 1/4 inch thick walls, so one on each side. And here I'm trying to use this 10-foot long 2x4 that I have to be my straight edge for my circular saw. Unfortunately, there was a bit of a bow in it, and it was just more of a pain in the ass than it was worth. And now I'm trying to use my little Craig jig, but the cut I need to make is so small that it does not fit on there properly. So I got this piece of, I think it's like a particle board, maybe a little thicker than a particle board, from a neighbor of mine, and I might use it as the countertop in the galley. So I'm using that to kind of hold it straight for me to get a straight line on my circular saw. So as you saw, I clamped one side where I'm at now, and then I put heavy stuff on the other side to make sure it did not move while I was going. And so then I had to move it down and make sure it was lined up properly to finish my cut on this side. And it was pretty straight. I had to sand down a little bit, which you'll see here in a bit. But now I'm doing the opposite end the same way, getting that straight line there, lining everything up, making sure. I must have measured 13 times to make sure that everything was good, since these are very important cuts. So, and then vacuuming up everything. Try not to make too much of a mess, but you know, circular saws are pretty terrible with dust collection. Now I'm measuring to make sure that everything looks good, and I'm realizing, okay, that one side has it's a little bit too long, so I sanded that up. And I was brushing all the dust off to prepare for the Spar Urethane. I'm using Minwax, and I did not dilute it at all with acetone. I went with thick. You know, this is not something that anybody's going to look at, so I don't care if there's bubbles, as long as it's not affecting the durability. So which is why I'm also using a roller. I've never done something this large before. I've definitely stained and polyurethane things, but I've never spar urethane something so big. So I just went over it, you know, as best I could, and then 4 hours later I did a light sanding, blew all the dust off, and then I wiped it all down with acetone, and then let that dry, and then went for my second coat. So yeah, it's yeah, you might have seen that I was wearing my respirator on the first one, but on this one I'm not, because you know, I read the can and it was like, oh, if it's completely enclosed, you should definitely wear one. But it was not, and the fumes were really not that bad. So I wasn't wearing it for this second coat. And then, you know, as you might expect for the third coat, I did the same thing. I waited about 4 or 5 hours. We got back from dinner, and I went in and sanded again and put on coat number 3. There we go. So now it's currently the next day after this third coat, and it seems very rigid, very hard. I'm actually tempted to, like, you know, take a rock and kind of like hit it on there just to kind of see the durability in case I need to do something else to this. You know, I was talking to Tony Latham on Messenger. I was like, I can't really do the epoxy on this, and he suggested just 3 coats of this Spar Urethane should do it. So that's what I did. So that'll bring us to the end of this video. Thanks for watching, and the rest of the floor will be its own video. Just wanted to get you guys caught up on the progress. Thanks so much, and like and subscribe.